Hello. In this episode, I'm speaking with anthropologist, journalist, New York Times best-selling author of What Doesn't Kill Us and other books, the unputdownable Scott Carney.
You do music with everyone you do, is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Ah, cool. That's why I said yes to this, because I thought it sounded interesting.
Yes, but you have to be inspiring, so
Fair.
the onus is on you.
I guess there's going to be no music.
No, but it's great. I've been listening to you on many podcasts, so
Right.
I know your story off by heart. So unfortunately, you repeat it because
Well, maybe you've got some new questions.
I have many new
yet.
questions.
Great. That's what I'm looking for.
How long do you have? Do you have a deadline or?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go over an hour. I generally have things to do.
Okay. Let's try and, because I'd like to get into some peripheral stuff afterwards. So let's try and do the first part of the show on your story, and then I'll go into some extra stuff that I've had questions about that aren't related to the song. So,
Sure.
Because I'll try and make the song about, the Wedge. So we're very focused on that.
Sure.
And if I've had a few guests now, I'm getting a little bit more experienced, who go on. You don't. You're very good at you. But if you want to interrupt me or I interrupt you, because I'm going to say the things that are in the audience's head, what they might be thinking. So if I do a hand movement, if I raise my, then maybe you could pause and let me have a little aside, and then you continue and something like that. Just
Sure.
so that we don't interrupt, because there might be a bit of a delay. We're across millions of miles of water here, so.
Sure.
Okay.
And you're in where are you in Australia?
No, England, Italy.
You're in Italy.
Yeah.
Oh my Lord.
Yeah.
Your accent is not Italian, I've noticed.
Very good. You Americans. No, I'm English. Yes, that's why I have such a wonderful, clear accent.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Excellent. You said all the water. So I was like, well, what has the most water between here and there? And I was like, well, the Pacific's way bigger than the Atlantic. So.
Okay. All right. Well, it's a lot of water. Apparently we're going by satellite, but let's not get into.
Fair. All right. Shoot. Let's go.
Okay. Let's go. Hello, Scott. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited. I hear you sing.
Oh, well, yes, I tried. I do my best. Yes. But, I've heard a lot about you, and you have I've searched high and low across this whole planet of ours to find the most inspiring people. And your name.
Who did you find?
Well, you came up way because you have a great story to tell about your adventures. And maybe you just kick it off. You launch into your story because these books you've written are wonderful, and I think it's best coming from you.
That is too general for me. I've done so much weird stuff, and I might just be talking to you about like clinical trials that I was in when I was a kid. So,
well, let's narrow it down then, because I have to write a song, and I think. Okay. And I also want it to be of use to you. So I think The Wedge, your recent book, where you expanded on because you met Wim Hof when he was just starting out. You wrote an article for Playboy magazine you tried to debunk him, but turns out that you actually became a big disciple. You've been dipping in ice water ever since. You climbed Kilimanjaro. You're a convert, and you've transformed your nervous system. And now this new book is about this, right. The Wedge.
Yeah, so I met Wim back in 2011. And at that point, he was basically a nobody. Like he had, when he was mentioned in the media, it was like as a circus act. A guy who climbed Everest in his shorts and a man who dumps himself as ice. Isn't that weird? Like that's sort of like where he was in the world at that point. And he was just starting to teach his method, which at that point was sort of different than it is now. where he said he could, make you immune to the cold and cure every illness under the sun. And, he sounded sort of crazy. And I had just written this book called The Enlightenment Trap about how meditation can kill you, how that search for spiritual insight can be deluding in some people. And, it ends fatally for a certain number of folks. And so I'd been down that rabbit hole for a while. In fact, I'd seen friends of mine die on their spiritual journey. So I was very skeptical when Wim was advertising these ideas that looked a lot like the miracles that people suggest can occur out of the Eastern traditions, out of the sort of called like enlightened Buddhist masters who can sit on the Himalayan peaks in no clothing and sort of like use their body temperature to save themselves. And I figured Wim was going to get people killed. So I went out there to debunk him.
Okay.
It turns out, long story short, I tried his method and I totally failed at that because his method worked. Within a week, I was sitting on these banks of the snowy Polish rivers in the middle of the winter, and I was melting snow around me with my body heat. I was like, this is crazy. And I guess I'm eventually going to have to go write a book about this. And,
oh my God.
And I followed Wim around and for a while I climbed up some mountains in my bathing suits and, almost no clothing. And the question that was in my mind was this magic from heaven or prana or some sort of enlightened technique that he has? Is this sort of supernatural or are there evolutionary reasons behind it? And as someone who's pretty darn grounded in science, I went looking for the sort of the biological explanations of this. And that led me down this long path with What Doesn't Kill Us, where I was looking around all of the various people in the world who use temperature changes to change their body. And, and that ended up in this book, What Doesn't Kill Us. And the idea here is that if you put yourself under stress, and in Wim Hof's case, that's cold stress, and also sort of hypoxia, which means not much oxygen in your bloodstream. He does that by hyperventilating. Mm-hmm. Hypoxia, yeah, that scientific explanation is a little off, but basically he blows off all your CO2, you feel weird, then you hold your breath for a long period of time, then you get hypoxic. And what I sort of discovered is that if you think about where we came from evolutionarily, our species is about 300,000 years old. You could breed with one of our ancestors 300,000 years ago. We're pretty darn similar. And in all of that time, and in fact, all of the time going back to the origins of life on this planet, we've had to deal with the environment, which means harsh environments, which means constant ups and downs in temperature, in stress levels from predation, and basically everything that can kill you, we had to deal with that. And our bodies became very fine-tuned with dealing with stress. However, in the modern world, we've gotten so good with our technology. Humans have gotten so good with technology that we've insulated ourselves from physical stress. So what looks like it's superhuman when you look at Wim Hof and like him sitting on an iceberg, like that's crazy. Why would he do that? I could never do that, we all think. But honestly, like 200 years ago, it would have been no problem. Before central heating, it would have been no problem just because we had to use our bodies to encounter the environment versus the intelligent stuff that we've been able to create. And so that journey, led me to understand Wim in a very intense way, where I dunked myself in ice water. I did all these crazy feats. And at the end of that journey, I'd sort of been doing the Wim Hof method for almost 10 years at that point. And my question was, well, what next? Like, if the idea is, Wim is like cold stress and hyperventilation, well, there are so many other stresses out there that must train our autonomic nervous system, the sort of the parts of our unconscious biology, to do things. And that's where this book, The Wedge, comes out. And the concept of the wedge, because that's going to be your next question, what is the wedge, is it's that space between stimulus and response. Viktor Frankl has some quotes about this. I'm not, I didn't originate the idea that stress comes in from the outside world, and then you have a choice right? That, you feel something, and then there's this choice in you is like, am I going to run away from that stress? Am I going to relax? Am I going to ramp up and fight? And in the ice water, with Wim, this is where I first learned it. You jump in the ice water and Wim says, relax. But all your body wants to do is scream and say, no, this is horrible. This is the worst thing in the world. I'm going to die. But, Wim's like, no, you're not going to die. And honestly, you're not going to die. And then when you will yourself to relax, that is what the wedge is. It's like you're putting your intentions, your consciousness to override, to drive a wedge in between that stimulus and that automatic response. And we can drive, it doesn't only exist in the ice water. It exists like literally in anything you can sense in the world. Like anytime a sensation triggers, that is always a choice between one thing and another thing. The only reason we evolved to be conscious in the first place, like here's the big question underneath the wedge is, why are we conscious? And conscious is a choice. It's like information comes in, and it's because your body can't automatically decide what to do with that information. It says, okay, big brain, you tell me what to do. I have an automatic idea of what I should do, but you're smarter than me. You decide. And by working on the wedge, which means putting yourself in various stressful situations, whether sensory, whether emotional, whether psychedelic, I mean, there's a whole broad range. It's developing that ability to choose, to listen to your body, what it wants to do, and choose whether or not you want to do that. And you get better and better and better at it the more you do this stuff.
So in the wedge, you test theory out in various situations.
I'm sorry, you broke up for a second.
In the wedge, you go through these different scenarios. You throw kettlebells. Is it ayahuasca you take as well, or you go into some plant medicine?
Sure. So in the wedge, I look at 10 different things, but there, it's not to say that is the limit of wedges you can try, but I looked at heat, I looked at fear, I looked at sensory deprivation, taste, and ultimately I ended doing some psychedelics, which are, which give you very strong sensations, and you sort of have a choice of what you're going to do with it, right? Are you going to go crazy because psychedelics are basically making you crazy, or are you going to try to sort of bring something out of it and stay sane despite the stress that is giving your body?
So now you never get stressed, sure?
No, I do. I do get stressed. I think everyone gets stressed, right? I mean, that's the nature of humanity, is that there's a challenge, and then you stress out about it, right?
Yeah.
And stress, it's interesting. We use the word stress. You are stressed out to sort of say a negative thing. Right. It's a negative thing, and then there's an emotional response. It's like frustration. That's what stress sort of means in the colloquial way we talk about it. When I say the word stress, I mean, I sometimes use it that way because I'm lazy. But when I try to use the word stress, it's really something coming in from the outside. So there's negative stress, but there's also positive stress, right? You're in an awesome conversation with a good friend of yours, and like things feel happy. That is still a stress because it's coming in from the outside. And I could choose to respond negatively to that and just say, you're an asshole, right? Or whatever. And that's still a choice. It's not necessarily the right choice, but it is a choice we have. So I see stress as just the stuff that's coming out. I see it as a neutral term. However, if we use it the way colloquially we do, we use it as like sort of a frustration thing, as sort of anxiety. And in general, the way I see that, the way I describe that sort of stress is when you have something coming in from the outside world and you do not have a physical response, because we have these two pathways in our body, the way our nervous system responds. Maybe you've heard these terms, sympathetic and parasympathetic. Sympathetic means fight or flight, and parasympathetic is rest and digest. And your body only has these two switches. Like you deal with everything in either a parasympathetic or a sympathetic way. And usually it's not full on. It's not like everything is fighting a tiger with your bare hands, but it's like varying levels of that signal. Now, oftentimes, because remember we're from the plains of Africa, and we were fighting tigers back in the day, and where our challenges were physical tiger coming at you, you dump adrenaline for energy, you dump cortisol for pain reduction, you dump a bunch of other things too. And then that gives you the power to get through the fight as best you can, or run as best you can. You do not want to be in the rest and digest state when a tiger is about to eat you, because you don't want it to go into the rest or digest state in like 15 minutes, right? You want to be able to fight it. Now, in the modern world, what happens is I'm sitting in front of my computer and I get an email that's annoying, right? A bad email, right? I don't know what it is, but something bad happens. Let's say it's a fight with your girlfriend or a tax bill, whatever. And then your archaic body only has two responses. It can be rest and digest, or it can be fight or flight. And so it dumps all the adrenaline, because that tax bill sucks, and it's ready to fight it with its fists and its teeth. The problem is that while the challenges in the olden days made sense, you wanted to go fight that tiger, I can't fight my tax bill. So instead I dump all that adrenaline, all that cortisol in my body, and I start to feel stressed out in the way we typically talk about it, which means you don't have a physical outlet for all that energy and pain reduction. And that feels horrible. That is what we say. That's really what we mean when we say colloquially, I feel stressed out. It's this sensation of anxiety without an outlet.
But you also mentioned about, like, for example, with the cold, you say there's slow cold and fast cold. Is that what you said?
Sure. Yeah.
So if you have the low in the house and it's cold all the time in the winter, you really have to have presence of mind to stay warm. But jumping in an ice bath for 10 minutes, you can really talk to yourself. So isn't the stress more in our life, the more of the slow stress than the tigers or the tax bills?
Oh, that's a good way to think about it. Yeah, so in the ice bath, you know what the issue is immediately. I am going to fight this right now. And the ice bath is a short period of time. Like, not many people take more than 10-minute long ice baths. You can, of course, but not many people do. And it's a quick thing, and when you tell yourself to relax. But if you have, let's say the water's 35 degrees or whatever, it's a very, very loud signal. But if the ambient air temperature is 50 degrees, that actually doesn't feel as cold as 50-degree water. 50-degree water feels colder because of the way that water wicks heat away from your skin. But it's like a 50 degrees in your house. And when I'm talking Fahrenheit and Celsius, you'll have to do the conversion yourself. I don't.
It's chilly,
Celsius. Yeah, it's chilly. And by contrast, in the United States, the average temperature inside Americans' households is around between 74 and 77. That's where most people keep their temperature. So this is quite a bit lower than that. But it's not deadly by any means. It's like you could just walk around it and be fine. But if you stay in that sort of like mildly cold environment for a long period of time, it is actually more difficult. I actually find slow cold more annoying than fast cold, because with fast cold, I'm like, I know I'm going to get in it, and then when I get out, I'll be fine. But if I keep my thermostat low, and I do keep it low in my house, I keep it in the usually the 60s, low 60s in my house in the winter, and right now it's whatever it is outside. You have to sort of like bring your mind into presence. You have to sort of like bring it up in order to stay warm. And usually you can't do that all day and do something else, right? Because when you're in the ice bath, you're like, I'm in the ice bath and I'm not going to be doing my taxes.
Yeah, you're in the moment. Yeah.
Whereas in slow cold, it's like it's really hard to be present against something that's that slow all the time, because then you're not doing anything else.
Okay, so you're more focused on these peaks, these intense moments of like you went into a virtual shark tank, and these extreme situations. So so I'm just trying to see how I can apply this in my life. What are the conclusions from the Wedge?
Well, the idea is that no one cares if you can stay in the ice bath for a long period of time. Whatever. Like, you don't do ice baths to become a better ice bather. That's irrelevant to anything, right? Yeah. Maybe bragging, but that's even just ego and dumb.
Do you have an ice bath in your garden? In your backyard?
I do not. No. I live in Colorado. I've got pretty decent cold water out of the shower. Okay. And I do heat training in the summer. I'm a big believer that we have seasonal changes. Like, it's not just these rapid things, right? But in the summer you should do heat training. I think in the winter you should do cold training.
Oh, that's very interesting. Yeah, that's a good, really good
allowed to.
Yeah.
It's also easier, right?
Cheaper, yeah.
I find ice baths, I love them. I love doing them because it's like this challenge, but I really only do them when a friend invites me over and they have done the ice bath because you have to buy the ice. It's all that big pain in the butt.
Right.
But luckily I have a lot of friends who do that. So, sometimes you're the only person in the community and then you have to be the guy. Luckily I don't have to be the guy here in Denver. Sorry, the question was.
So the conclusions of the wedge, like for the average man who's, not. So, what can we learn?
So, one of the the base understandings that we haven't talked about here is that every sensation is an emotion. Wim Hof says feeling is understanding, and what. When you're getting that ice bath, not only are you clenching and there's that physical thing you're fighting against, but there's also this emotion that comes up. The first time I jumped in an ice bath, I cried, like there's tears coming down my eyes, and I brought up some sort of like ancient problem in my childhood or something.
Really?
And it did. And I think with a lot of people, there's emotions that come in. And the basic one is fight or flight, like, oh my God, I'm going to die, right? You're facing death. Yeah. And there's emotions with that. And every sensation you ever have is bonded with an emotion at some very basic human level in your body. And the actual mechanisms, you can read my book, it's called Neural Symbols. But basically, anytime you feel anything, the only time you sense anything in the world, your brain is bonding your current emotional state with a sensation. And this becomes actually like the bits and bytes of human consciousness. If you think of that consciousness as like a software computer program, the only way we understand anything in the world from the very first moment that we're conscious is mixing sensations with emotions and then sort of building that up. And when you get to hundreds and thousands of these neural symbols, you start to get sort of complex thought. That's sort of like the underpinnings of everything. So the idea with the wedge is that if we're able to choose our emotional responses to stressful situations, especially things that have negative implications for us, we're able to influence how we feel things in the future. You become more emotionally resilient. You become more able to take on challenges, more able to take on risks. And just in general, you expand the region in which you can feel comfortable, which you can operate.
Yeah, I've been on something you said there about the sensations affecting the mind. I've been on the meditation retreats, and with the Buddhas, the Vipassana technique, they say you sit there for a long time. You do the slow thing, and you feel that you try to feel the sensations first, and then what emotions come out of that, so it's kind of what you're doing, but in a long.
Sure.
But it gets very intense. At the end of every hour is you're in agony.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's fascinating because if you look in the Indic traditions, right, there's these two. I'm just going to use Tibetan Buddhism because I'm very familiar with Tibetan Buddhism because I've written books about it. There's this idea of the Sutra in Buddhism in general, which is the open teachings of the Buddha, which is generally with the techniques associated with it, quieting your mind and becoming kind to everyone. Be good, right? And also quiet yourself so you can sense and feel the world around you. Right. Now, and that's the open teachings of the Buddha, and that's honestly my favorite part of Buddhism. But then there's this other side of Buddhism, which is Tantra, which is, you've probably heard the word, and you heard about Sting having sex with people, right? It's the secret teachings. And Tantra is actually sort of where the Wim Hof method emerges from, which is where you put yourself in very intense situations, like like very intense anger, very intense lust, very intense whatever it is, and then you learn to control yourself in that situation. And that's generally the difference between Tantra and Sutra, even though that's not the way they generally describe it within the tradition, but that's what I've seen out there. And what the Buddha says is that the sutras are for everyone, and everyone should do the sutras because you can calm yourself and pay attention to the sensations, and that is the gateway to enlightenment. But he says the faster way is through Tantra, but it's way more dangerous. That's the way it's sort of described in the tradition. And honestly, it is way more dangerous. I've seen this is where people go crazy, is in Tantra, right? Tantra, where you try to find your most angry, ennui, death-focused, lustful, negative self, and then turn those emotions into positive emotions. But not everyone's ready for that, nor should they be.
I've heard different definitions because where I've studied it, Tantra means many techniques all in one. And then, and that kind of techniques more sounds like Agni yoga, which is where you the fire yoga. So you confront it in a strong way.
Sure.
But you both.
Sure. I mean, the real definition of Tantra is secret, right? It's the secret traditions, and there are a variety of techniques in it. Right. But the general theme in Tantric techniques is this sort of encounter with intense sensation, right? It's intense versus, it's sympathetic versus parasympathetic. So yeah, I am making a generalization for sure.
Okay. So that's going back to it. So the sutras or the Tantra is also the quick, the fast or the slow, this power and sympathetic, everything is you've really these polar opposites, this positive and negative, neutral.
Right.
Okay, very interesting. Because you also wrote a book called The Enlightenment Trap about some people that went quite wrong with trying to achieve enlightenment. What I also wanted to ask you about was because from what I've read about you, I've heard you in other interviews talk about the Sandman and things like that, and how I find it. I wanted to talk to you about death, because Wim Hof. I read from your article that you wrote that he got very into, he took his practices out into the world after his wife's death, and you also had a friend die in front of you, and
right.
You still believe in the one life. Is that way to put it?
Oh no, I'm agnostic. I don't really know what's going to happen after I die. I think that no matter what tradition you come from, right? No matter what happens after death, because honestly, I mean, people have said they've come back from death, but you can take those all with a grain of salt. They might be bang accurate, but I can't know, and you can't know. And my feeling is that no matter what judgment might come, whether it's reincarnation or God with a big beard, saying something, or whatever happens in Judaism and Islam, like it's no matter what that end result is after you cross death's threshold, the likelihood is that how you live your life right now is important. And we should do everything we can to live the best possible life we can with the tools that we have, and then let that stuff take care of itself afterwards. I just don't know. Like there's so much out there, so many different opinions, and they're really just opinions. I like to think there is something. I like to think that there is that whatever energy makes up consciousness does not dissipate. Like there's this law in physics, is that energy cannot be created or destroyed. And I think that applies to consciousness too. Now, I don't know what form it takes, but I think that something goes on. There's something very unique about the ability to think and sense and understand the world. And I think that something is a substrate in the universe in one way or another.
Because the reason I'm asking is because I try to string my guests together. So the guest that I had last week, she was a researcher into life after death, and she worked for this. She worked for the near-death experience research board, and she was on the switchboard getting the calls for many years.
Oh wow!
People would tell her about their near-death experiences, and she would write them down and get these correlations between how many you saw the tunnel, you saw the light, and then what else did happen. And so she because you're an investigative journalist, and when you're having a story, you look for eyewitnesses. I mean you base your conclusions on how many people have seen this. So she collected all these stories, and then there was all these correlations between it, and she had people go out of their body, and then they go out of the hospital and float around the building and then come back, and then they would tell them there's a blue shoe on the windowsill, there's a blue shoe, I swear, go and get it. And there's so there was, and many stories like this of, that correlate. And also the University of Virginia has done many research into after death, life before life, and many research things. So I just
I find that research fascinating. I mean, it still just accounts, right? Are these just the random electrical firings of a dying brain? And there's a whole type of explanation that goes that way. Is this the soul leaving your body? There's a bunch of explanations that go that way. There's also all these stories of people who've been reincarnated and remember their past lives in various ways. There's lots of this stuff. I still don't think there's a smoking gun in any of it. And in fact, part of me doesn't want it. I think that the interesting thing about being alive is not knowing that answer, right? Is that if we did find out, actually, there is life after death, and here's what it is, and we catalog it as, and then here it looks like the Islam was right. Okay, everyone, that sounds boring to me, right? That sounds like really like why? Okay, why are we doing that? I'd much rather have the ability to go out and discover, and everything I've read about NDEs, and I've looked into them a little bit, right? I've done a little bit of research into this, not at the level of writing a whole book about it, but I've toured the NDE world, and yeah, it's interesting. There's interesting stuff. There's cool anecdotes, but I don't think it rises up to the level of being like, well, this is what happens. This is the only explanation. Because, there's that other famous study about NDEs where they went into an ER where a lot of people die. And somebody was interested in NDEs, so they placed I think it was a stuffed animal on top of a closet, right? And they have all these explanations of people, I'm leaving my body, I'm looking down at my body. And then they had like a stuffed animal that you couldn't see from the gurney, but was like above, and no one ever reported seeing the stuffed animal. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff out there, and great. Like, I don't know. I don't think anything's answered.
Because you said, you're at this crossroads, and you definitely took the fork about the biological, but so there's two hypotheses. One, something after death, and the other one, nothing. You get this one life, however long it is, it doesn't matter, and then you're gone. And then, so what is there must be some evidence for that.
Well, there's other explanations too. There's life after death, there's life before death, but maybe there's no death. Maybe there's no life, right? What if what we experience is conscious? What if, like Alan Watts says, you are the universe experiencing itself? You look at like, you go into physics, and time is subjective, right? It's not subjective at the human level. It's subjective at the physical level, having to do with the speed that you're moving, right? And at one point, all of the universe, as far as we know, was all compacted into one little infinitesimally small thing. All of the mass of the universe was like smaller than a period.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And that's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah. And then it all exploded. So let's say consciousness is a force, right? Let's say consciousness is like gravity in some way. And this, I like to think about it this way, and that consciousness naturally emerges as a property, as some sort of symbiosis with matter, and we are just a manifestation of that. And so what we think of as ourselves, like I think of myself as Scott, you think of yourself as Jack, right? But are we? Like, are we really that? Like, who am I without all of the interactions I've had with other people throughout my life, without all of the stressful and non-stressful experiences? Who would I be? I have to, like, my consciousness emerges because of interactions with things. I don't exist in a bubble. And now I'm talking to you, I'm one sort of person. I'm talking with my wife, I'm another sort of person. I talk with my mother, I'm another sort of person. So there's no like one me. I think that the self is an illusion. I don't think I exist. I don't think you exist. I think reality exists, but I think I have a very egocentric idea of myself. And I think you have a very egocentric idea of yourself. But the reality of it is you have to look at like the city you live in. If you look at the country you live in, if you look at the whole planet operating as one super organism, and we are just part of that. The way Alan Watts says it is, who would you be without the sun? Right? Like, you think the sun's there and it's heating and it gives you a sunburn and it grows some food and stuff. But like without it, like you are the sun. If the sun wasn't giving energy and didn't like put energy on Earth for billions of years, you would never be here. So you really have to think about yourself at a cosmic scale. And then you can just, where would the sun be without, lots of supernova? Where would the supernovas be without whatever the initiating incident is? And what happened before the initiating incident, right? Yeah. So these are all where I am. I don't have an answer. I just sort of throw shit at the wall, and I'm like, I look into space. I'm like, man, it's all big, right?
No. I mean, we're all solidified sunlight. Yeah. If you look at all the atoms of our body, they're all, we're carbon life forms. So yeah, I mean,
we're all stardust, man.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, and you were in Chennai. You were a war correspondent before then, and you lived.
Yeah. I've done a bit of war corresponding, but I was more of a foreign correspondent. My first book was about organ trafficking, where I tracked the world's buying and selling of human body parts, mostly out of Chennai, which is in sort of the southern India on the right-hand side. But I've also done stuff in sort of communist insurgencies in central India. I've been held up by 13-year-olds with AK-47s and bows and arrows. Like I had that whole side of my early career where I was doing pretty dangerous stuff on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm. Just to get some context for your journey, because it needs to be a good song. So
okay, nice. I mean, in a way, it all originates when I was in college, and you get this opportunity to go for a year abroad in America, right? We have our junior year, and if you're lucky enough, you get to go abroad. And most people in America go to like Germany or Scotland, and to drink their way through college. Mm-hmm. For some reason, I decided not to do that, and I went to India for a year. And I was like, wow, look at this crazy place. And like, I wasn't interested in like the spirituality of India. I was interested in the absolute urban chaos, and that somehow it all hung together. Mm-hmm. And it was just very culturally different. And so I kept on wanting to, and in India, the other thing is like, it's stressful. Everything you do, just crossing the street is like, feels like a major, like, oh yeah, I did something hard. Right. And so I really liked that. Like this was very early Wedge stuff for me. I liked the challenge of just being
crossing
there.
the road, trying to cross the road. Yeah.
Yeah. And then everything else you do. And so I kept on wanting to go back. And so I dipped into anthropology for a while. I was after a year in India, I graduated college, and then I went back, and I ended up spending 2 more years there. And then I got I started doing a PhD because I figured the way to keep going back to India and doing weird stuff is to be an academic, right? Academics have all the fun. So I did all of the coursework for a PhD. I almost got at the dissertation. And then I was like, wait, what am I doing? Like, I'm going to live in an academic office fighting for tenure my whole life. I'm going to write articles and 3 people will read them. This is crazy. So I dropped out and then became an investigative journalist. So I apply anthropological techniques to the work that I do. And then, I went to India. I spent another 3 years there in Chennai and sort of traveled around the north quite a bit and wrote lots and lots of articles and books while I was there.
Well, because you're at the top of, you are who you are because of all of this experience. If you didn't have all these articles, you think you wouldn't have been chosen you wouldn't have been commissioned for this article. You wouldn't have you wouldn't have gone on to meet Wim. You wouldn't have done this. So it's all, so
it's what all are you related, man? Mm-hmm.
So yeah, what are you moving on to now then?
Well, I just finished a book about, I finished the next one already. Well, I mean, the manuscript's in its sort of final stages. I'll probably actually finish it in October or something like that. But the draft exists, right? And it's about a totally different thing. I mean, the themes are still there, but it's about the deadliest storm in human history that hit what is now Bangladesh in 1970 and killed 500,000 people. This is a known event, but most people have forgotten about it. It happened 50 years ago in 1970. And then that storm didn't only land on the coastline of what was then East Pakistan, what is now Bangladesh. It it turned the results of an election, which instigated a genocide from the ruling party that wanted to stay in power, which then created a wave of refugees, which then started a war between India and Pakistan. And because there was a war between India and Pakistan, the US and the USSR got involved because those are Cold War powers. and the Soviets were were an Indian ally, and the U.S. was a Pakistani ally. So America got involved on the side of the people doing genocide, and the Soviets got on the side of the good people. And then this almost sparked a nuclear war between the two of them, where there's a standoff between the Enterprise, which is not Picard, but was actually the aircraft carrier, had a standoff with Soviet subs in the Bay of Bengal. And so what I'm doing is I'm trying to tell the story through the perspective of the people on the ground, like the cyclone survivor who then endured the genocide and picked up arms to go fight on this. But the big picture is, look, we're all part of this huge system, and things like storms can change the way the world works, right? And so environmental events are also human events, are also cultural events. And the allegory here is that we're living in an environment that is heating, that is going to have more and more storms. And every time we have these environmental changes, we're risking things that we're not even thinking about. So it's an allegory for climate change.
Ah, okay. Oh, I get it. So, oh, geez. Well, how did you come up with that? Why did you pick up the storm in Bangladesh 50 years ago is not something that's who's the inspiration
that people think about?
Yeah.
I mean, I work with a writing partner in Norway, a guy named Jason Michelin, who we have done a lot of stuff together. We actually, he got held up with me with the child soldiers in India in 2009, I think.
Okay.
And you know, we used to write a lot of articles together, and now we decided to do a book. So it sort of comes out of the genesis of us talking about it, and wanting, you know, also realizing that, you know, climate change is a thing that's happening. I know that the main criticism of What Doesn't Kill Us, this is really funny. If you go on Amazon, all of my 1-star reviews I have one sentence at the end saying, you know, the world's getting hotter, you know, basically. And all of the people who attack me are like, the world's not getting hotter. I got a lot of that. But the thing is, like, climate change is real, science is real. You got to pay attention to the data. And the problem is that no one's been able to tell a climate change story that's engaging, right? Like there's never been a book. I mean, there's been Inconvenient Truth, and there was that, like, Day After Tomorrow, the tidal wave nuking Manhattan and that stuff, but no one's told like a real life climate change story that was engaging. Maybe there was a book called Isaac Storm that was okay at one point, but I
read that one. Yeah.
But that wasn't really about climate change. That was also about a storm, but
Galveston.
Yeah, exactly. They said, it's funny, they said that was the deadliest storm in history. 5,000 people died. Deadliest storm in history was 1970, where 500,000 people died.
Yeah, but they weren't Americans, man.
True, and I guess you can do the math and say one American is worth 100 Bengalis, which I'm sure someone has said, yeah, that probably checks out. So that's horrible.
When I'm writing a song, for example, when I write a demo and I might play it live and I see the reaction, you know, you spent probably a year on this book, I don't know how long, and then launch it and you find out later. I mean, do you not, because a lot of people now are writing books, they write them as blog posts and they just put them together as chapters afterwards, so you can see which it worked, it's successful. So, but with the way you're doing it now, it's quite, you know, you just launched this huge thing. I mean, did you test it out before, or?
I mean, the Wedge came out at the exact wrong time in human history, right? So it launched on April 14th, and that was the week that the United States went into quarantine for COVID. And
good time to read a book. I mean,
well, it's a good time to read a book, but also our idea about what stress is changed, right? The principles are all right in the Wedge, but I would have probably written it a little bit differently for the COVID world, because now what we feel is that we're stuck in our little boxes.
Second edition.
Yeah, right. Could rewrite it. And we feel stress in sort of different ways than we did 6 months ago. So I think that I probably would have written it a little bit differently had I been able to correctly predict the global pandemic. But, you know, it's the world we live in.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean by you have such a long launch for a book. So do you get people pitching you ideas for books all the time? I mean, they say, hey, I got a good idea for you.
Oh, yeah, I don't pay attention to them. I mean, I mean, you know, people say, you have to do this I get that email a lot. You have to look into electromagnetism and 5G and like all sorts of shit. And no, I do my own. I do my own stories. And I don't know what the next one is. I'm probably getting out of the biohacking space after this, is my guess. Like I may do like sort of one-off chapters, like 20-page books in the future on sort of the on Wedge topics, but I'm probably going to go into a different direction, just because there's so much to write about, right? And I don't want to just be, my roots are, I wrote on organ trafficking, hardcore investigative journalism. I wrote a book on enlightenment, and then I'm just happen to be known for biohacking, but I encompass whatever interests me. Basically.
Yeah. That's the same with, when you're a musician, you have to write people, if you do all ballads, that's people want to keep listening to that. That's what they want to hear, and if you're Stephen King, you don't want a comedy, So don't you feel pressure to just keep in that genre and keep churning it out?
Not really. I mean, there's always some sort of pressure, but I basically have gotten to the point in my career that I just want to do what I want to do. And to hell with it. Like I don't have the aspirations to be like a mega millionaire. That's the problem. Like I don't need to build a supplement empire, right? That's what people do in this genre.
Everyone's have you got magnesium for sale at the end? Where can people buy your magnesium, Scott?
Yeah, exactly. No, I don't, unfortunately. Just buy my books. And I think that there's a lot of like.
So you're a bit distasteful of the whole biohacking. Are you tired of it?
I think there's brilliant people in there. I mean, there's brilliant people who sell magnesium pills. Like I'm not necessarily going against all of that, but I do think that there's like people want shortcuts. And my feeling is, no, we want experiences. Like it's not about optimizing, right? I don't give a fuck about optimizing. I care about living a life that I want to live. And that's very different. Like, if one thing I write about in the Wedge is like, you can go out there and you can exercise, you can look at yourself and like, I'm overweight and I want to get a 6-pack, man. I want to go out there. I want to look awesome. And the goal then is about aesthetics and not feeling. Now, of course, sometimes if you look really good, you might feel really good, but I don't want a 6-pack so that I'm working for my 6-pack, right? I want my abdominal muscles to work for me, right? I don't want to like hike up a mountain so I get super fit. I want to hike up a mountain because hiking a mountain is awesome. And that's the difference with, like I'm not necessarily, I'm on the journey. I'm not trying to get to a goal.
But you had Dave Asprey write the forward to your book, and he's very, I lengthening my life as long as possible. This life has to be as long. I mean, you don't quite accord with that.
I mean, I don't mind. If he wants to do what he wants to do, he's welcome. And just like anyone, like I don't have the answer, right? I'm just some fucking dude, right? Yeah. What may work for if Dave wants to I want to live forever. I mean, I think that's crazy in a way. Like I would never want to live forever. And when we had that conversation, so I was on Bulletproof Radio like a year ago or something. And Dave's like, Scott, how long do you want to live? And because he wanted me to give a number, I'm going to live to 180, man. And he had a number. I don't know what he wanted to reach. And he asked me how long I wanted to live. And I was like, I don't know. I could die tomorrow. I've lived a great life so far. The point, I don't want to extend forever. I want to have this concentrated point of my consciousness be meaningful to me. And the absolute length is irrelevant.
That's why I wanted to go back to that thing you said before, because I kind of want to pick you up on that, because what you said to me doesn't really chime. To me, you're kind of in the middle of these camps. You're in the middle of this. You're not going over to the spiritualist, but you realize the physical shell is just a vehicle to get you through here. But when I'm speaking to this lady who studied all these reincarnatory experiences and also mediums who can channel people from the other realms, and they all say when you get there, the only thing people they regret is how they treated other people here. And it's all about, the love you give. And, it's not about your bank account or how long you lived. It's how you treated other people. So, having that information that's what's important really is kind of key. It's it's not to be discounted and say, it doesn't matter. I don't believe if the Islams are right or the Jews are right. But knowing what happens after this is quite important, I think.
Why? Why can't you be nice to other people just for right now? Like, why is that even relevant? Like, why not be nice to people because it's good to be nice to other people without the reward of what they regret later? I don't live my life to die. I live my life to live. I don't think that it's interesting at all to be like, well, on my deathbed, it's all, if I'm happy when I die, life was worth living. I think that's a ridiculous idea that a lot of people have, right? It's like you get to the end and then you were living for that last moment. If your last moment was positive, then, Buddhism, you'll have a favorable rebirth, or in these mediums, maybe they have some other idea. I think that, life is not about death. Life is about living right now. And I promise you, I've seen people die. I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen in a variety of ways. And I promise you that life ends in a minor key. If life is a song, it ends in minor. And when you get there, it's going to suck, and there's nothing you can do about it.
But that's not,
right?
That's not what they say. People who've come back from say it was the best experience ever. It was the major key with even a sharp, and it was the best, and they don't want to come back, and it's a fantastic experience. And, knowing that is that the way, you're not going to run a multi-million-dollar business selling supplements, but you're going to, help put every penny you make into that orphanage or into that, and you making other people's life, you make it the center point of your life. That's what I was saying.
Well, maybe, again, these people, I'm talking about death. You're talking about after death. And I don't know if we can know anything about after death. Death is going to suck. I don't know. When you get that threshold is going to suck. And then
that's like saying that's the ice bath. That's the ice bath. I mean,
well, yeah, but how do you know? But I can get out of an ice bath and come back and tell you what it's about. I do not believe. I don't believe it, though. I don't think they're credible in a way that scientifically says, okay, this is true. I think that there are multiple explanations for that. I'm not saying it doesn't exist.
But right? I can put a man in prison for the rest of his life with one witness.
Okay.
But I've got 2,500 witnesses from about near-death experiences, or however many, hundreds of thousands. Okay. Why is it not
hundreds
credible?
Of thousands of people who believe in Pizzagate, right? There's hundreds of thousands of people who believe in things that are not real. There's hundreds of thousands of people who believe that hydroxychloroquine will cure COVID. Just because there's hundreds of thousands of people who believe in Christianity, Islam, and cold fusion. It doesn't mean that it's that. I mean, it could. Some of those things are definitely bullshit. I am agnostic.
What's Pizzagate?
Oh, you don't want to know. Don't go down that rabbit hole, right? But people want faith. People want to believe in something. I think that's beautiful. It's great to believe in something, but it's not fact. Just because 2,000 people say something does not mean it's fact. I mean, there's like 60% of America believed in Trump at one point. Like, that does not mean they're right. Lots of people believed in the Nazis. Does not mean that they are right. Just because we have ideology does not mean that it is.
But I never met the Nazis. I don't know. I've never seen it. I've never seen any Nazis, but I believe they exist because I've heard many different stories about them, and they all have many correlatory points.
Sure. Yeah, that's fine. It's not to say that evidence does not exist in this world, but you cannot show me hard evidence for an afterlife. It doesn't exist. There's no hard evidence. All you have are anecdotes, right? I have, for instance, taken mushrooms.
Yeah.
Right. Sure. You have people's testimony. Does not mean it's right. Because here's another explanation. As you die, your brain begins to shut down. As your brain begins to shut down, your sensory experiences change. As your sensory experiences change, you release the chemical DMT into your brain, which has a hallucinatory effect. Then you weren't actually dead because you came back, right? Then you come back and you remember those sensory experiences. And then because people have been talking about NDEs for 70 years or longer, right? Then you have these pre-existing ideas of what an NDA might look like. You apply it to those sensory experiences. You come up with a story that then begins to come together. Here's a very valid alternate explanation for what that all means.
But people come back like 15 hours later. They've got rigor mortis. And they've got much more than lights. They've seen. They have whole stories. And they've gotten facts that they couldn't know about from other sources. So it's much more than I saw a tunnel and I saw some colors. So
maybe. I mean, again, I'm agnostic, but I do not think we have the answer there. Like you can keep on saying there's evidence, and then we'll look at the evidence, and then we'll say, well, will it 100% add up to definitely afterlife? If so, why is there not a scientific consensus around it? You know, it's because the evidence gathered leaves questions, right? It's not a physical law. It's not measurable. It's testimony. And testimony, 500 years ago, we were debating the number of angels that could fit on the head of a pin. Well, we were talking about witches, and we were talking about all sorts of stuff. We have an ideology right now. It does not mean ideology is accurate. And there is testimony of seeing angels, and there's testimony of all this stuff. And the other thing you said, like, you can build an orphanage and that will be good, right? And you're going to do good in this life. How can we always know that our actions are good? Right? My first book on organ trafficking was all about how good intentions go horribly wrong. And I would find people in the organ trafficking business who will literally kidnap people and steal their freaking kidneys. And I'll be like, Scott, why are you doing this? And I'm like, you have no idea how many lives I'm saving. Because they're talking about the kidneys, the people who receive the kidneys. They're not looking at the harm they've done. I looked at orphanages in India where these ostensibly very good people had an orphanage with 180 children in it. And they're like, I am feeding all of these children. I'm taking care of these orphans. That sounds good. But how were they supplying the money for the orphanage? Well, the only way the orphanage made money was through international adoptions. They needed to sell kids to the International Adoption Committee, which they would get $14,000 per child. And they realized that their own stock of children, orphanages make kids sick, right? They make kids disabled. They do not give enough stimulus. The kids they're more sick. They're just not as great products to sell on the international stage. So what these orphanages would do, they would kidnap children from the streets, sell them fresh to American families. And I tracked a kid down who was kidnapped from that orphanage. I met the parents in India, found the orphanage, flew to America, where an American family paid $50,000 for their kid, who's now growing up in the States, who was kidnapped. And good intentions can go horribly wrong. And just because you think you're doing good does not mean you understand all of the chains of causes and effects that occur. So I am, how you treat people, sure, but how do you know how you're treating people? How do you know really what is operating in this world? And I would, as a member of the American, consumer elite, right? I buy shit all the time. My sneakers were undoubtedly made by a 13-year-old in Zimbabwe or something like that. Undoubtedly we are all morally compromised because we're all connected to this big superorganism. And the idea that you can be better than other humans is a fallacy. It's just wrong because we're all interconnected, because you and I don't exist, right? You and I aren't the shell that we think we are. We're actually part of the whole. So that's my answer.
Yeah, but I still think, if Dave Asprey started running an orphanage, you do a better job than that guy you saw doing it in India. But I think it's more intention. If you, that's karma. You get judged on your intentions, on your pure of heart. If you genuinely know that you're doing bad, then you in the end of it, you judge yourself.
Did Hitler know he was doing bad?
Yes, definitely.
I don't think so. I think he really, I could be wrong. I don't know the guy, but I think he thought he was doing the best thing for the world. I think he thought that he was going to make the Third Reich, and this was going to be the best way for humanity to go forward. I think he really thought the Jews were evil, right? And so you got rid of this evil in the world, and then I think that Hitler thought he was a good person, because I think everyone thinks they're a good person. I don't think there's probably going to be an outlier, right? Mm-hmm. There's probably going to be Jeffrey Dahmer, right? Who's like, yeah, I eat kids because I want to do bad. And there's also the Canaima shamans of South America, these people who worship murder, right? And okay, so there are these people who believe they're bad people, but that's a very small subset. Most people have a rationality for why they are good people.
Yeah, if you're crazy, that's absolved. Yeah.
Sure. Well, even some non-crazy people can be like that. But I think, again, these are outliers. but I do think that I've met mob bosses in India who talked about how they would shoot people in the head, right? But they were doing it to solve a very real social problem in the country, in Bangalore, because there were these legal disputes where justice was not being applied, so they had to go do the killing. So they have a rationality why they could commit murder, and they thought they were great, and they made a lot of money. So obviously God looks down on them positively. Like, I don't think intention, I think it's way too solipsistic. Like, I think I'm doing well, right? But Marie Antoinette, let them eat cake, like does not get the actual situation that's going on out there. And we are all deluded if we think that we are doing, and we can try to do good. You can try to be a positive force in the world, but you can't know you're doing good.
Okay. Well, I still think you're somewhere in the middle there, but I know you're okay.
Sure.
Because maybe I'll just pitch, because when I was in Chennai recently, and when I was there, I had sort of a spiritual experience, and I got in touch with it. I found a teacher online, and he was in Miami, and he was doing basically what Wim Hof does, like pranayama. So Wim has, what you do is you're doing basically one type of yoga activity, this one pranayama, and you develop these superpowers. You on your control over your physical, like Wim can control his immune system, and with a breathing technique. And so he's been doing breathing techniques since he was 3 years old, and he has got control over the prana in his body. And I'm sure when you were in India, you met many teachers, or you heard of many teachers who could do pretty impressive things just by controlling their prana. And so this guy, Nehemiah Davis, he lives in Miami, but he grew up in the Bahamas, and he was doing this pranayama, all these different types since he was 3 years old, and he grew to develop these powers, and he could he could change the weather, heal, because he was sitting on, for example, one day he was sitting on the porch outside his house, and this is an anecdote, this is secondhand anecdote, so feel free to not take it on, but so he felt this dot going up and down his back, and just like a small pressure of heat. And he turned around, and his brother was holding out one palm, and having the other one in a ceiling mudra, and he was sending out a beam of energy from his hand up and down his brother's back. And so just an example of the way that you can send energy from your body to someone else's body through these. So this is what I wanted to pitch to you as possibly another article for you or something, because it's kind of following on with these breathing techniques that you can, and also incredible concentration. If you control the prana in your body, you can manipulate things in the outside and send out your energy. Do you have any experience?
Maybe. Again, I don't think that I am me, and I don't think you are you. So the idea that energy could transfer between two people is not at all shocking, right? For instance, I'm transferring energy to you now by just talking to you, right? Where I'm sending something that is an idea from myself to you over virtual wires, right? And that is likely changing some sort of neural pathways in your brain. Whether or not they're good or bad, I don't know, but neural pathways are changing because you're recording this information. So clearly, I am sending energy. And do I think that somebody can send a beam of energy? Offhand, no. But I don't think it's necessarily impossible, because I think energy is energy. I think consciousness is a type of energy. I think it's a fundamental force in the universe. And to think that it could be manipulated and changed is obvious, because we see it happening all the time, again, in the way I speak, changing your physiology. Do I think it operates as a graviton beam? Not particularly. To say that it couldn't happen, because gravitational waves do exist. Did they exist because they were initiated from consciousness? I know that's a good question. I don't know. Is a star conscious? Maybe, maybe not. Do I think this guy is doing that thing? I think it's an anecdote. And until I do it myself, I mean, you even said it was a secondhand anecdote, right? Yeah. I have felt weird things in my life. I have seen things that are unexplained. Does that mean it has to be an invisible energy force that then has a whole ideology behind it? I don't know, not necessarily. That's adding more of my own subjective ridiculousness. And my feeling with a lot of these gurus is that they're all crazy. I feel like a lot of these people who are out there, I've met tons of gurus. Mm-hmm. I've met tons of them that are like really spiritually interesting people. But I've met also tons who are so isolated that once you say you're enlightened, okay, I'm enlightened, that means you have arrived at some state of perfect knowledge in some way, right? Yeah. And then when you get two of these guys in the room, do they agree on everything? They're like, oh yeah, sending graviton beams. Oh yeah, I send graviton beams all the time. Okay, cool. Let's talk to Jesus. Hey, you into graviton beams? And they all agree. No, they don't, man. They totally have totally disparate ideas of what's going on out there. And once you become your only peer, that means you only have your own ego defining what you're doing. And this is what makes people crazy. This is why my student committed suicide in Bodh Gaya like 15 years ago. It's because she thought she was enlightened. All she had to do was, and that's a sensation for her, right? She thought, you're meditating, you get to this insight, and you're like, oh, I want to stop this right now because I'm enlightened. And she killed herself. That she had the best intentions. Enlightenment is a good intention, but then she killed herself, which is not a good result. And I think that, with the book, The Enlightenment Trap, I follow this guy named Michael Roach, who is said to be able to do all these siddhis, or siddhi is the miracle, superpowers. And siddhis are, one, he doesn't do them publicly in a way that's verifiable, and two, when he does show it to them, it could well be a magic trick, right? For instance, Satya Sai Baba in India, very well-known guy who was very well-known for performing miracles, bans anyone who knows magic, as in like the illusionary magic of David Copperfield. He bans anyone like that coming to his events. And the sleight of hand can make hundreds of eyewitnesses believe in something, even if it's not real. And then he will say to himself, let's say he is faking, he'll say, yes, but I need to give them belief. The belief was the outcome, so that my lying was actually a good thing. This is what they call, what's the word for it? It's in the alignment trap. It's basically allows you to lie in order to get the higher result that you're giving. Skillful means. That's what it's called. Skillful means. This is in Tibetan Buddhism and also Vipassana. If I use skillful means to manipulate them to find enlightenment, then I can do whatever the hell I want. Well, this lets you do all sorts of other things, including murder, including all these negative things that you're like, well, that guy's not enlightened, but he'll believe he has arrived. So this is why I think enlightenment, anyone who says they're enlightened, whoever says they have achieved that final state, is insane and definitely not on the path. I think that we have to be always on the journey, but you never get. No, you need to be on the journey. You can't even think to yourself, I've arrived. You need to be on the journey, because the moment you arrive is the moment you're definitely not there.
So anyone outside there advertising themselves as being enlightened is not, because you don't tell anyone if you don't.
Even if you think it to yourself, even if you're Avalokiteshvara, even if you're Manjushri, even if you are the Dalai Lama, if you think you've arrived to that point, you have not arrived to that point. That is the nature of that. It's sort of like a singularity. It's like an asymptote. If you ever, you can always approach the line. You can get closer and closer and closer and closer. If you hit it, you have hit a contradiction, space-time, and the universe, and you are definitely insane. And so you can't even think to yourself, I am enlightened. If you ever let yourself think you've gotten to that point, that is when you've crossed over into insanity.
It's interesting, because the way I've learned it from my metaphysical studies is that there's Kundalini, yeah? And you rise it up, and as you open each chakra, you get the siddhis. So like the siddhis you were talking about, you get the clairvoyancy, you get the you get all these siddhis, and where you get these powers, but when you raise it all the way up, you have a lot of siddhis, and if you misuse them, you can bring great harm to the world. So the first chakra you awaken when you raise Kundalini is the sex chakra, and it gets incredibly stimulated. So that's why a lot of these people become perverts, or if they have they become incredibly sexually, because it's a test. If you can control your mind and your sexuality, then okay, Kundalini can go up to the next one. But if not, then it flows, all the energy flows out of there, and you might do terrible things, or you just be a dick. So, and as you go up to each Kundalini even higher, and that's why some people fall off, because they're being tested each time this Kundalini goes up. Have you any experience of that from India and from your studies?
Oh, sure. I mean, look at Dolpopa, or sorry, not Dolpopa. What's his name? Drukpa Kunle, right? Drukpa Kunle is a like 13th century Bhutanese saint. You should look him up on the internet. Google Drukpa Kunle iconography Bhutan, and you will see. So I don't know if you've ever been to Bhutan. I snuck over the border once in 2011, I think. No, earlier, 2007. I snuck across the border and sort of hung out in Bhutan for a little bit, because it's really expensive if you don't sneak. And all of the walls in Bhutan have the picture of Drukpa Kunle painted on there. Drukpa Kunle's picture is not his face; it is an erect phallus, hairy balls, spitting spooge. Now.
Sorry?
Oh yeah, Google it. Google it, Drukpa Kunle.
Is that why it's so expensive to get in?
No, it is not. It's because this 13th century saint, he was the progenitor of what they call crazy wisdom. And he was this monk who went around fucking all the nuns, telling all of the kings that he was enlightened, and everyone believed him. And then he may have committed some murders too. I mean, he was like a crazy guy, but he did it because it was skillful means to tell you that he was really he had these powers. And so all of Bhutan is following this crazy wisdom thing of Drukpa Kunle. Look him up. He is nuts. And then people will still tell you, no, he was enlightened. Forget his actions. His actions were just skillfully teaching us that those actions are a path to enlightenment. And so there is a rationalization showing that this guy was okay, but he was crazy, and he's not the epitome of humanity. And he's sort of like what you're talking about. I don't know about that process of opening up chakras and becoming more and more enlightened. It seems to me that the problem with these types of Hindu traditions, Hindu oriented generated traditions, and Buddhism is actually comes out of Hinduism, right? It's like leveling up. It's like, okay, you got this level. Now you want the next secret spell, secret power. Now you have to go do these techniques. And it's like playing Dungeons and Dragons or a video game. It's like you do these quests, and then you get these things, and then you get to some sort of like ultimate level. I think that is like really human and really attractive to want that stuff. But I think it's all it's all an illusion. It's all this it's just offering you powers, things making you better than it's all egocentric. It's ridiculous. And I think that anyone who's trying to get a siddhi is really making an error, because what does it matter? Like
it's a byproduct that you have to deny each one, not use it, so that you go to the next one and not use that one, and that you're not supposed to.
Yeah, but it's still a bait and switch. It's telling you, hey, you made it. Hey, dude, wink, wink. Hey, you made it to City 3. Now you can do the City 3 thing. And who cares? Like it's still like you're telling yourself you're moving, you're progressing. Yeah. And even if these things exist, right?
But you wrote a book. You wrote a book about how you can do, all the things you did in climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. So you had cities of a kind, and I
think there are evolutionary powers that we all have because we have physical bodies. And it's not to say that other people in the world don't have physical bodies, have not noticed that they could do things, right? But I think the explanation is about creating hierarchies. I think it's about creating these human institutions more than it is what our biology is capable of, because we're all capable of this stuff, and you can just go do it. You don't need to go study at the feet of a guru. to do it. You don't need to go meet the great Wim Hof, who's not that great. Wim's a cool guy. He opened the door to this awesome stuff that we can all do, but we should never put him on a pedestal. I would never want to be Wim Hof. Dude's fucking nuts, man. He almost killed me on the top of Kilimanjaro. I love the man, but I love his errors too. Like I love the fact that he is crazy, and that he is not the role model of the future. I am not his disciple, and nor should anybody be his disciple. He is just a guy who has a really cool thing. He showed us how to do stuff, and now you can too. Then that's it. There's nothing more. There's not like he's got this extra secret. Hey, Wim, tell me your next secret. You know it. I know you're enlightened. No, he's not. He's not fucking enlightened.
Okay. Oh, that's all right. Well, let's try and bring this around then. I've got to go. I've got to write the song now. So
okay.
I think we drifted way out there with what I'm interested in, what you're interested in, where we. I think we had a great chat anyway. So what I'm still seeing is these two opposites of the parasympathetic and the sympathetic, and this being the wedge and being present in these stresses is the way to control because my guest before was Stephen C. Hayes, who's a psychiatrist, and he has all these techniques for watching the mind, like pretend your mind's a bus, and all the thoughts are passengers, or write down all your thoughts, and so watch the mind, and so you're saying pretty much the same thing, I think.
Yeah, it's very, very similar. The way I phrase it is that every sensation is a choice. Right? Every time you feel something, the only reason you can feel it is so that you can make a choice on how your body responds. For instance, right now you're experiencing lots of physical things that you can't sense. And like I don't know if right now you can feel your blood circulating. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. But if you really paid attention, you might be able to. Or your hair growing. Like there's no choice there. There's no reason to. You can't feel the hundreds of millions of cosmic rays that are going through you because they're not relevant to you. But if you're in the ice water, if you are walking your dog, you have choices. And so now you get to make choices. Consciousness is about choice, and it's about bonding the mind and the body together.
Okay. All right. Well, I think I've got enough to go on. If I run out of inspiration, I can always go away and read your book, which is on scottcarney.com, also on Amazon.
Yep. Yeah, it's on all the places you can buy books, even bookstores. But scottcarney.com is usually the best portal to go through and pick it up. I'm SG Carney on all of the social medias. Okay. There's mailing lists. There's all of the stuff that you might want. You can get a free chapter on my website. So that's sort of cool.
And you're on Audible as well? Is it actually hear you reading it?
That's me reading it. If you like the dulcet sounds of my voice, it's on Audible.
Well, I'll have you on tonight. If I can't get inspiration by midnight, I'm turning you on.
Love it.
Wonderful.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
No, it was my pleasure. Really, because I'm living here in the south of Italy, and I don't have much great conversation like you do in Denver. So I'm really appreciate you taking the time to reach out as well.
We're all stuck in our little bubbles right now. Don't worry. All right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And send me the links.
There's a wedge we drive into our minds to thrive. We wither in this world or we evolve. What is truth? What's belief? What is hiding underneath in the lie-infested world in which we crawl? From what I've seen with my own eyes, a lie is always in disguise. My faith's built on solid base. I trust in what I touch. erased. I'm convinced by black and white that the day will end in night. The song is long while will is free. Life ends in a minor key. You call me faithless, my faith's unshakable. I've got more belief than you'd believe. Our faith meant cheat, faith meant lie, faith they steal, one day die. I'm a believer, a true believer. Our faith they'll kill to make a million, sell their bodies, sell their children. I'm a believer, a true believer. Lives are bought and sold. Lies are always told. Belief is the currency we traded away. Thank you to Maurizio Sarnicola and Massimino Vozza for working with me on the music, and Dori Verbo, my researcher. And thank you to you for listening. Please rate and review the podcast if you enjoyed it. If you like the song and want to support us, then you can download it for $1 on our website at podsongs.com. It's also available on all the major music streaming services. Thanks again.